Today on the Winning with Shopify podcast,
We are a one-stop shop that helps you source products anywhere around the world.
what looks like $5 can easily turn to 500, and you think this is just a net loss.
Finding suppliers that you can trust is not easy.
Trump's whacked 100 and something percent on a tariff. That's a problem.
There's a lot of shady practices here. There's a lot of suppliers overseas who will try and help you by under-declaring the value of the goods and what have you.
I don't want to sound like a newsroom and call it a crisis, but we do have clients saying this is like borderline disaster. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Winning with Shopify podcast. For anyone that's not tuned in before, my name's Nick and I've just had a baby, so I'm really tired. But it's great to have you guys tuning in. So sorry if I'm not my bubbly self today. I will try my absolute best. But I'm not sleeping much and my little one is keeping me awake at night, which is obviously amazing and a beautiful time in life, but I am quite tired. But welcome to the show. If it's your first time tuning in, if you've been tuning in for a while, then welcome back. If you haven't already, hit subscribe, leave us a review on whatever platform you are listening to. It really helps support the show. Now, today, I'm very excited to introduce a brand new sponsor, and these guys have got some amazing offers that I also want to flag. And this is only part of why we've actually partnered with them. We're going to be talking about some very interesting, big global things going on that are probably affecting all of you right now. And you know exactly what I'm talking about and who I'm talking about as well, which we'll come on to in a minute. The three things that I think are most important to flag to you guys that these guys offer. Number one is that they can save up to 40% on your stock costs. 40%, 40, which is amazing. They can save you time faffing about with all the different suppliers around the world, ordering samples, trying bits and pieces. Obviously, it's hugely time consuming, and there's a lot of cowboys out there as well. So they can help you with that part of the process. And third thing as well, you've got to have an invite to work with these guys. But if you mention Winning with Shopify, then you will get 50% off that initial sample run. I'm joined by the amazing Anthony from Cavela, who's going to tell us a lot more about this. But first of all, Anthony, welcome to the show. How are you?
Nick, thanks so much for having me. Very excited to be here. I'm very excited. We're in Mexico right now, visiting some suppliers at the moment. Very timely. Everyone's running around trying to find alternative suppliers. So I'm enjoying the sunshine out here in Mexico.
Amazing. It's beautiful and hot in the UK, actually, but probably nothing like Mexico. But we're going to find out a bit more as we talk through as to why you're in Mexico. And people might have seen
Sure.
by the topic of stock and that sort of stuff we're talking about today. Before we jump in, though, Cavela, it was a new name to me, if I'm completely honest. Probably a new name to most of our listeners, but a name that I believe and why we've selected you guys as one of our sponsors, a name that people need to know. So tell us a bit more, Anthony, about Cavela. What are you guys? Who are you guys? What do you guys do, and what can you do for people listening?
Sure. So Cavella is a virtual product sourcing agent. The idea is very simple. Selling products online today is pretty easy. Spin up a Shopify account, handle payments with Stripe, Flexport for your shipments. What's still very difficult is how do you make your products in the first place? Sourcing from suppliers can be quite tricky. How do you find the right supplier? How can you know who to trust? How can you streamline the process of getting those initial samples? How do you place an order? How do you handle QA? Orders, the topic of tariffs is now coming up as well. How do you handle all of that? We are a one-stop shop that helps you source products anywhere around the world. So we have 200,000 suppliers across 40 different countries, and we have made that entire process a lot easier. So brands come to see us, they tell us what they want to make. We find them a set of suppliers across the world who can make it and streamline the entire process, and then make sure that the products get sent to your warehouse.
Amazing. And just to put my kind of seal of approval on that as well, guys, I know a lot of you trust me, which terrifies me sometimes. Make sure I always say the right thing and give the right advice. But to put my seal of approval on it, I don't think I've ever met a Shopify store that sell their own products that have not had a problem either with manufacturing, even supplying the raw materials to then manufacture their own products, let alone, as you say, Anthony, all of those issues that come along with the Q&A, the language barriers, something sitting in the port. I myself have imported things, and I'll mention this a couple of times as we go through today. But I've imported bamboo sunglasses for a store we used to run. And sometimes we got charged import tax. Sometimes we didn't. Sometimes we declared it ourselves. Sometimes we didn't. Sometimes it came in via DHL and we got a nice little phone call. We paid over the phone. We set up an account. Other times, the first notification we got is your stock's being sent back to China. And obviously things like Alibaba, it's an absolute jungle. It's a minefield of things. So I think you guys are in a really good space. And obviously, and just to speak openly for a minute, Anthony and I took a long time before getting this episode in the diary to record because you've been very, very busy. So I know you're going to mention Trump, you're going to mention tariffs, but I'm going to kick off with question number one today. What are some of the biggest challenges facing Shopify store owners today in terms of getting stock on their shelves?
Yeah, so I think that the big one is we're going to talk about is tariffs. When you need to get stock on your shelves, as far as we're concerned, that is the sourcing process, right? How do you find the right supplier? Finding suppliers that you can trust is not easy, especially when you're looking outside of countries like China, which is a lot of brands are now increasingly doing. So how can you find suppliers? A lot of people are using these platforms like Alibaba that you've mentioned, but Alibaba has a lot of middlemen. It has a lot of other issues. A lot of other suppliers that are quite excellent might not be on these online platforms. So how do you find them? That's especially true as well when you're looking in countries outside of China. When you're looking outside of China as well, you're dealing with suppliers that will have higher MOQs than you're also dealing with in China as well. So how do you get a foot in the door? How can you find a supplier who you can work with that isn't going to break the bank either? That is a massive problem. And in addition to that, even once you've found suppliers, there is an entire process of how do you get your stock on the shelves. So the entire process of sampling, I'm sure will be very familiar to a lot of the brands listening to this. It can go many rounds of sampling. A lot of miscommunication can happen. You can have issues at the production time as well. QA that should have happened didn't happen, or it failed, and now your production is delayed for whatever reason. And then now suddenly with the tariff landscape changing, there's a scramble to get your shipment sent overseas. It's a very chaotic process, and so what we've seen is that for brands that are trying to kick off a new product, it can take 3, 4, sometimes up to a year of time before you can get your product from concept to execution in your warehouse.
Yeah, which is obviously a huge pain to an e-commerce brand. As
Yeah.
someone that sits in marketing, the worst thing I ever want to hear is, "Oh, that's out of stock, and we're not getting any more, or we're not getting any more for a while," or "Actually, there's a huge lead time on this thing." Do you ever find that in your warehouse you have dead stock? You can't sell it, no one wants to buy it, and you can't get a refund on it. Or alternatively, you're missing inventory in your warehouse that you need. You've got sales coming in and you're low on stock and you haven't ordered more stock in time. All these things hit profit. And I've been there. I've run my own Shopify store and had exactly that problem. But we've partnered it up with Inventory Planner, who have the most incredible app to help you manage that and forecast exactly what products, what SKUs, even down to what color of product you need to order in advance to make sure stock levels remain consistent throughout. They're also running a 7-day boot camp. And if you want to go and sign up to that, it's 7 emails over 7 days. And it takes the same amount of time as your morning coffee. And in 7 days, like me, you can become an inventory management pro. Both links are in the description. Enjoy. One of the biggest, you touched on this briefly as well. And one of the biggest things I think brands struggle to do, certainly in the earlier days, and sorry guys, I'm going to use some stereotypes here, and this is one of them, is you get so caught up with that one dream supplier, and suddenly you phone them, and there's no voice at the end of the phone. There's no response to your email. Something's happened. They've gone. They've changed. They've moved. They didn't tell you because you were a small fish in a big pond. But diversification of supplier, how should that process work in an ideal world, or through something like Cavella?
Yeah, so I think that, look, the old way of doing things was that you'd find one supplier with whom you would work and have like a long relationship. And I think that in a lot of cases that is appropriate, and that is what a lot of people are still doing. But the problem is that a situation like what we're seeing today is revealing the issues with that. So when you need to quickly pivot your supply chain, you're now locked in with one supplier with whom you've worked with the entire duration of your brand's existence, and you now have to find another supplier. How do you go about doing that? It's very, very difficult. So, when it comes to diversification, it's not just about diversifying across suppliers within countries, but now we're talking about diversification across countries. And so, you know, diversification is difficult because there's a reason a lot of people source in China. China continues to be, one of the most efficient countries when it comes to sourcing and production. And even with the tariffs, I suspect that a lot of brands will continue trying to source in China. They'll, have certain tricks to deal with the current situation that we can talk about. How should brands deal with, handling the tariffs with their existing Chinese suppliers? But diversification is increasingly becoming a requirement, and so that means diversifying across suppliers, both within and across countries. That allows you to have a hedging solution. In a world where the tariffs change, you can quickly and easily pull the trigger on another supplier who's perhaps less affected. You might want to stack up some backup suppliers and do things that way. These are all things that have been part of how we built Cavella, right? So the way that we work is that when brands come see us and they want to source a product, what we'll do is that we'll find suppliers in a host of different countries and even with multiple suppliers within a given country and provide quotes. And so what a brand can then do is order samples from multiple suppliers and do that sourcing process concurrently with all these suppliers at once. And then when it comes time to production time, they can you can look at what the landscape looks like right now and essentially pull the trigger and place that order. Um, we also aggregate a lot of these brands under one platform. So one of the big complications that brands face is that when they're sourcing, they want to keep everything under one supplier because it's less headache. You don't want to be dealing with all these different email chains and all these different points of contact and all these WhatsApp groups and WeChat groups and what have you. Being able to work with multiple suppliers but under one single platform allows you to have all of the advantages of consolidation, while maintaining all the advantages of diversification.
I mean, you've touched on so many points there. We could probably and we might do this in the future as well, guys. Actually, a whole episode on just diversification of supplier. I'm going to ask one question, and while you were talking, I'm just thinking, what is the one thing I think we should really cover on this? There's five things running around my head. I think it's about product quality, and I think that I'm gonna take a punt here and say it's probably the biggest question people have is if you order from multiple suppliers from multiple countries,
Yep.
like say this baseball cap I'm wearing right now,
Mm.
which I don't normally wear on the show, but I've not been in the office very much, so I thought we'll dress down. But my baseball cap, how do you have that consistency if there's four of them on a shelf in a physical store, or actually if somebody buys the same quantity three of this product, and one comes from one batch from Hong Kong, another one comes from another batch from Mexico, another one from Argentina, as an example. How do you get that product quality across multiple suppliers? If someone's just using one supplier for a range of products or all products and they suddenly pivot and switch to somebody else, how do you avoid that kind of drop in quality? Or it's not even drop in quality, but just you want them to be the same so somebody gets the same product when they order the second, the third, the fourth time.
Right. It's a great question. So, typically what you'll want to do is you'll want to at least keep the same supplier for a given product vertical, which is to say, you don't want to have your best seller being made consistently by all these different suppliers. It mostly exists as a backup solution, provided you're dealing with a current situation. But, you know, the quality question is something that's important because when you are trying to source overseas and you're trying to find an alternative supplier, it can be a little bit of a problem. And it's not just quality in terms of getting the same consistent product, but even not having any bad surprises. One of the big things that we've seen is that brands will fail to do is that they'll fail to deploy, for instance, a third party QA, which is by and large, the cheapest and best thing you can do for your brand when dealing with overseas suppliers is to get a third party QA. So that is to send someone to the factory to make sure that everything is looking good, and they can go in with a reference sample in hand and make sure that you have the product that you'd like to make, and that the entire production looks and feels exactly like the product that you want to be on the shelves. And so by having these checks, you can essentially get closer to guaranteeing that you're getting consistent quality across your product line.
Which I think is it's a game changer.
Game
When
changer.
with the globalization going on at the moment, I think there's a real tendency from a lot of brands actually just to say that, like, do you know what, we're going to go with this supplier, and if the products are good, great, that's the end of the equation. You just need one customer to do a bit of digging and try and find who your supplier is, and go, do you know what, that factory there's children working in that factory, and suddenly the whole thing falls apart. And no brand needs that kind of that kind of PR exercise on their desk, regardless of size, or history of trading, etc., etc. I think it's such an incredible thing that you actually send someone to the factory to check stuff. For so many little brands, so many of you guys listening, that is just out of the question for you. As I say, the only thing you have to go on is the quality of the product that arrives. So again, I think having that third party do that exercise for you. But I guess, Anthony, you're the benefit people get of working with Cavella as well is, and a massive advocate of certainly this part of the exercise, is you've done that across all 200,000 suppliers. So even when they reach out initially and say, "Hey, let's get some samples from one of these guys," you've been to visit them, you've met them, you've seen what quality of product they're doing, and obviously, if there's any bad reputation, they're in the bad books with you, and you're probably one of the biggest people actually driving work for that factory or products to be sent out. Is that right?
Right. So there's different sets of vetting,
Okay.
cycles of vetting based on who the supplier is and how they've come into the network. But at production time, we're sending that verification across every product order. So that is one guarantee that you have. But there's lots of other sort of steps in that guarantee. So what you mentioned, wanting to avoid having a bad surprise, such as your factory is engaging in you know uh, unsustainable or unethical production practices. There are certifications that exist and that are also provided by third parties that we collect and make sure that these suppliers comply with them.
Yeah, yeah. I think one of the things we did with the bamboo sunglass business, which doesn't exist anymore, by the way. If you've been listening to the show for a while, you know it's my claim to fame that I had a failed bamboo sunglasses business. One of the things we did though is and I think I said to you before as well, Anthony, we actually got them to send a picture of one of our products or pictures of it from, here is a bamboo tree that gets chopped down by these guys, gets put in this truck, sent to factory, and we use that as marketing content on our website to say, like, this isn't plastic which is made to look like bamboo. It's certified bamboo. It grows up to a foot a day in China. So actually, we made a thing of saying this is like authentic Chinese bamboo. Like, we went the opposite from, like, they put that tiny made in China on the back of little products you buy on Amazon and things. We went the opposite and said, this is certified, authenticated Chinese bamboo that you're buying from, which, I mean, we talk about this a lot on the show about marketing anyway, but you want to drill down to what's that number one big thing that people really want from product. So if it's they want a really soft product, so they want a t-shirt that's really soft, I think using your sampling process to go, do you know what? Let's get samples from all these factories and let's choose the one that has the softest product, as long as the commercials stack up as well. But that's also a good way that, and I know from experience, and you could probably tell us a lot more about this, Anthony, but even just getting samples into the country, whichever country you're based in, from another country overseas, that's providing the samples, even the samples can be a nightmare to get through customs, delivery. What looks like $5 can easily turn to 500. And you think this is just a net loss. Like, there's no good outcome here apart from I'm going to buy more products from them, but I'm just losing money until I've decided on somebody. So again, making that process streamlined, massive cost saving as much as time.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, especially when you're purchasing samples from multiple suppliers within a given country, there's those shipping fees stack up. I'd say about when you're ordering a sample, half of the sample cost that you're paying goes to shipping.
Our partners at Seguno have released a brand new app for Shopify, and it's called Shopify Connect for Canva. You can essentially look at all of your product images from Shopify directly in Canva and export them straight back. This can save you a lot of time. If you want to find out a bit more about this or go and find the app yourself, you can go to seguno.com/Canva. Enjoy.
So what we do when you're sampling within a given country, we consolidate, get all the samples together, send it over to you. So you're at least saving significantly on the samples themselves.
Which is really smart. It's a
Of course, yeah.
really good way to do it. And let's go back to globally right now. I mean,
Mm.
there's I don't want to sound like a newsroom and call it a crisis, but we do have clients saying this is like borderline disaster, which obviously creates opportunity. But equally, in the thick of it, in the moment when you wake up and go, Trump's whacked 100 and something percent on a tariff, that's a problem. That's just literally doubled our overhead for getting products into the country. What are you seeing brands do in response to that right now? What is the strategy?
So here's what we've been advocating for brands who are worried about what's happening with tariffs. So the first thing I'll say is that if the tariffs remain as they are, this is a extinction level event for a lot of brands. And so I think that the government knows about this. They're not blind to it. I suspect, and I've been telling this to brands for some time, that the tariffs are going to come down. They're not going to go down to zero, but they are going to come down significantly. So the number one thing that brands should do is that they should seek to delay an importing event as long as possible. So if they can delay production, that is ideal. So there was a pushing out your production, leaning into what inventory you have is the number one thing you should do until the dust settles. Let's say that you can't do that, right? So what do? There's a couple options that exist here. One is to use a bonded warehouse. Now, bonded warehouse is a warehouse that exists outside of the US borders. And what you do is that you will send your stock to that warehouse, and then you will slowly trickle it into the US as needed. And you'll pay tariffs on on those imports, but you'll do it in a way that buys you a little bit of time so that you're
Which,
not,
sorry to
excuse me, go
interrupt,
on.
but just to be super clear on that, if this is new to any of you as well, I'll ask a really kind of simple question. So you could in theory only import a product once it's been sold and have it delivered direct from a warehouse outside of the US to straight to customer in theory. So you could do that with a bond. So you're not paying import tax on anything that's not already been sold. So you know you've got a profit on that product.
Correct. Exactly. So that's the one thing that allows you to at least buy more time, depending on what happens with, de minimis as well. This is something that is also an evolving situation. But if you are able to send all your products to, for instance, Mexico, have them held there, and then trickle them in and send them on a order by order basis, and de minimis remains intact, which is looking like it probably won't. But let's see how things pan out. That would allow you to avoid the tariffs. Now, if that also is not an option, there's a couple small things that you can also do. One is to play on HTS code optimization. So when HTS codes are essentially a categorization of products, and your tariffs and duties and imports fees will all be related to what category your products fall into. And you'll sometimes run into cases where your product could be considered one of various types of HTS codes. Now, you have to actually make a strong case for it being in one or the other. But when you are kind of straddling that line, you can make a case for your product being considered one or the other and optimize on the basis of which HTS code has more favorable duty fees. So, one example would be footwear. Footwear has pretty disparate fees based off of how they're categorized. Is it sports footwear versus not sports footwear? You could be looking at a tariff difference of, 5 to 20% difference
Wow,
on that
that's
basis.
really
So
good to know. Hmm.
that's a big one. Again, you have to make a compelling case. If you miscategorize your products, you will be fined, and they'll be paying a lot of attention to that. So that's another thing you can do. And then another thing that we also recommend, if this is possible, is that your tariffs are the tariff fees are calculated on the basis of the production cost of the products. And so when you're sourcing from suppliers overseas, what you might have is you might have a price which is called the EXW price, which is the price of just the manufacturing, the cost of getting the product made and essentially to the door of the factory. And then there's this FOB price. FOB price is the price of getting the product made and also taking it all the way to the port where the freight forwarder will pick it up and take it. If you don't separate that out, then your tariffs might be calculated on the basis of your FOB cost, meaning that you're going to get more cost that is tariffed than should otherwise happen. So, one thing, just double check that the tariffs are being applied on your EXW rather than on the FOB cost. It's marginal, but when you're talking about tariffs that are in the you know hundreds of percentages, it's pretty sizable. The last thing I'll say here is that you can look at invoices, right? So when you are getting your uh, when you get your product made, there's different steps. You might be doing a lot of R&D. You might be have a mold made for your product. Make sure that that is taken out because that shouldn't have your tariffs applied. So get an itemized invoice from your supplier and make sure that um, the costs that are getting reported really reflect actually the manufacturing of the product itself, and that will allow you to hopefully cut off a little bit of the costs that you're getting taxed on. Now, one thing I should mention here is that you know there's a lot of shady practices here. There's a lot of suppliers overseas who will try and help you by under declaring the value of the goods and what have you. that is a risk, and I don't advocate for that, because if you get caught, then you know, pretty hefty fines there. And, the border, they're checking that. They're looking at how much did this product typically cost? They're looking at how much have you, imported with this supplier for this product in the past, and they'll be running those comparisons. They have all the data. So you might be able to cut things down, but be wary of, previously declaring a unit cost of $6 and then suddenly having that declared now as 150. You're going to run into
Mm.
trouble.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, some really good advice there. And I always take exactly the same approach to you is wherever the line is, let's stay as far away from it as possible and do things properly. I've certainly heard of more than one brand categorizing products differently and saving money in the process, which then means they've been reviewed and gone, well, you categorized them wrong initially, so we're going to fine you. And they sort of say, well, that's fine because the new category is cheaper. So we've picked up a fine to find out we're in the wrong category that was too expensive in the first place. But equally, it could completely go the other way. So I think some really good steps that people can certainly take with this. Um, I guess it's as you say, there are some very grey, shady tactics here, which is why I think, although I focus more on marketing and customer acquisition, the moment we first spoke, Anthony, it was like, okay, there's a real reason why I want to get you guys involved long term in the show. Actually, is having that third party, you guys in the middle, actually doing some of this, doing the due diligence for people that any shady practices get whispered back to Cavella. It's like, right, we're doing an investigation ourselves here. Like, this is not okay. And you have that insurance policy of working with you guys, which I think is really, really important. With some of these things in mind, then, what are some of the mistakes that brands make on an ongoing basis? I know I've mentioned one or two that I've come across. Normally, when a bestseller's out of stock, and I'm really angry because it's our best marketing campaign. But what are some of the mistakes that people make on a regular basis that you think all Shopify brands should be wary of and should be trying to avoid?
Yeah, so I think that there's a couple things when they're looking at suppliers. I think that letting your operations lag behind growth is one big one. So sales scale pretty quickly. Supply chains don't unless you plan for it. So you know treat your operations like a growth engine and not an afterthought. So invest in better forecasting, fulfillment, flexibility, and make sure that your suppliers are equipped to handle any boom in growth in sales that you might feel. So again, just making sure that your capacity to handle demand is prepared for any big push in sales that occurs. I'd say that's one big one. There's nothing worth, as you said, that just being out of stock, because that is, those are potential sales that are now just not being realized, and that's a big problem. I'd say that another one is, I think, over optimizing for cost, and this is kind of related to that. So if you're looking for the absolute cheapest unit costs, then you might not be optimizing on other aspects that are important for your business. I'll give a very quick example. We had one of our brands who had been sourcing this beautiful linen product in India, and the unit costs were low. The quality was fantastic. The problem was that the brand was selling to hotels, and hotels needed to have stock delivered to them very, very quickly, to match basically the hotel season. And so, she'd get these contracts and they'd say, great, we want, a couple thousand units. And she's like, okay, I can get that to you in 2 months or 3 months and what have you. And they said, well, that's too late for us. So what we did is we found her a supplier in Mexico, which was a lot closer to where her customers were, and then we got that that lead time down to half. Now, the costs were marginally greater than what she was getting in India, but the product quality was still, was at that same level. But by
And not turning away orders now, which is equally as important as one order
that's
saved.
it.
What's your marginal cost looking like now? It's a bigger picture
Ex-
approach, definitely.
Exactly. So now she's not making a lot more sales, and so that allows her to capitalize on all these sales that she wouldn't otherwise have, and that's because she optimized on something else than just the cost of the units. And then I'd say that just that's the same thing, like underestimating lead time variability. When people speak with suppliers, and suppliers quote them on 30 or 60 days, uh, if you plan around that to the day, then there's so many things that can go wrong. We've seen so many examples of that of just in the last five years on a global scale, but even on the individual scale, you can have a sample that goes wrong. Whoever's leading your production can get sick and is off for a couple days. A holiday in the country that you didn't know about. Um, all sorts of things can happen. So just buffering a little bit could be a big value add.
Yeah, yeah. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert two of those things you've said. I think it's a really good list of things and definitely seen a few of those myself. Two of them I'm going to convert into marketing campaigns, guys. And obviously, it's all relevant to the user, their pain points, what they want. And so sometimes you might think like this is amazing about this product and no one cares. I tend to find it a lot with pharmaceutical like supplement based products, that kind of thing, where their owners are saying, wow, it's so good, it even does this, and users are going, I'm in pain, want to not be in pain, done. That's the end of my decision making process. And you're talking about microbiomes, I got no idea, like no clue. And I've had multiple clients talk about that. The two things I would say, one is quality. So you mentioned about actually having you pay slightly more to get better quality rather than just trying to get the cheapest price. What that looks like in marketing then is you run a marketing campaign and as a test to say, let's focus on quality. So it might be in the second image of the product is zoomed in to show the super high quality of stitching on this new trainer that you're looking at buying, or this new garment, to show the actual quality of the seams and everything, to show this is a top quality product you're buying here. Or actually, although it's a red t-shirt, the stitching is actually in a sort of beige color, and that is just a minute detail you might have missed, and your whole USP then becomes about getting those minute details to the forefront. And again, see if that converts better than a different approach, which might be it's just a beautiful design, or all the best people are wearing this product at the moment. The second time I would say about lead time, that higher quantity one you mentioned, Anthony, is this has been a game changer for so many brands we've worked with, where we've said, okay, you're selling, you mentioned hotels, we have a client that sells product to hotels, and we only found out because she said, I think you listened to the podcast as well, Anya. So I'm going to use you as an example if that's all right. But Anya said, I can't make that time for a meeting because I'm meeting one of my hotel clients. We said, whoa, hang on a minute. You sell to hotels, not just single items out, but you sell big wholesale. Yeah, yeah, of course I do. That's where a lot of the business started. Now I'm trying to go direct to consumer. Well, none of that's on the website. Imagine how many more hotels or other establishments like Airbnbs and other stuff that might want to buy high volumes of products. So we then well, in the process at the moment of looking at how do we make some pages around that. We've done it with lots of other clients. We've just created like a corporate button in the menu. So it's like product drop down, product drop down, product drop down of all different categories of products, colors, sizes, different styles, different items themselves. And then have one just called corporate orders, or even put something on the product saying, if you order more than 10 of these, we give you a 5% discount, or click here for a wholesale quote. And what we do then is we say on Google Ads, like, okay, that is then worth what, $5,000 instead of a normal order at $100 or $200, because $5,000 is the average revenue we make per corporate order. So actually, we're trying to drive people to those corporate orders, which I think, again, is a really, really important thing. But you can't say that if your supply is taking 6 weeks and actually half the big corporate orders get cancelled anyway because you're too slow and you've annoyed someone, which is really bad for your reputation. So I think some really important points there. And I think I sometimes find when we're talking about back office stuff like supply chains, we forget about the front office and front of house and actually what that starts to look like. Talk us through then, Anthony. I know we've spoken about quite a few different sort of facets of Cavella here, but talk us through that process. If someone's listening going, all right, Anthony, you've mentioned like all of my shortcomings as a business owner trying to sell products. Where do I start? Like, I reach out to you guys and say, hey, Winning with Shopify sent me in. I want to get some samples. What happens next? What's that end-to-end process look like through Cavella?
Sure. So it starts with engaging with us and doing a product onboarding. So we one of the big parts of what Cavella does and why we're able to be so much more efficient and get better costs is because we're using a lot of AI in our operational process. A lot of your users are definitely using ChatGPT and seeing the power of AI and LLMs in optimizing different parts of their business. Sourcing is no different. So we're incorporating a lot of AI into how we build efficiencies in our operations. And so one aspect of that is going to be when you onboard with us, we are going to onboard your product, get all the product specs, and we're going to run things through AI to make sure that we're catching all of the missing details in your product spec sheet, identifying all the different limitations, questions that suppliers might have up front, and get those addressed at the very beginning. We now have a complete product spec of the product you want to make. And then what we do is that we go through our database of our private network of suppliers, and we identify all the suppliers with whom there is potentially a good match here. And we reach out to the suppliers on your behalf. And again, automating some of these processes to make it a little bit more manageable. A lot of your brands have probably reached out to suppliers and see how that communication gets kind of hairy. By automating that process with a lot of LLMs and AI, we're able to engage with hundreds, if not thousands, of suppliers at once, which is how we get so many efficiencies. From that, we'll come back to you after a couple days, maybe a week and a half if your product's a bit more complex, and come back with a list of quotes. And you'll have a full breakdown of the cost, lead times, examples of other similar products that suppliers made in the past, any certifications that are required for your product, different brands that supplier has worked with in the past, all this information. And from there, you just have a quote table that is standardized, and you can purchase samples from the different suppliers that look good to you. And that's a payment that happens through Stripe. You're not, wiring money to a bank account in Hong Kong or what have you. It's just Stripe payments, and then the samples get started. And what you then get is a bit of a feed. So you'll get updates in a feed style platform that shows you the products being made. Samples are sent to your doorstep, and then you can just look at the samples, give your feedback. If we need you to do a second iteration of samples, then there's no problem. And then once you're happy with the samples, you just place an order, and we will send an in-person QA agent to make sure that everything's looking good. And then the order is sent to your warehouse, and we handle everything in terms of the optimization of the freight forwarding, handle all the tariffs and duties and what have you, and it's just sent to your warehouse. So for brands, it's a pretty simple process. They just tell us what they want to make. We find them quotes from reputable suppliers. They purchase the samples sent to their doorstep. They take a look, see what they like, and give some feedback, and then we dial it in and then send the order to their warehouse.
Which is amazing. I mean, when you look at the time scale, imagine like 50 years ago, guys, flying around the world to all these different suppliers, getting sample runs, things. You're talking a year before you've got to the point where actually with you guys, you could in, as you say, 1.5 weeks if it's a bit more complicated, and you're at a point where you can start clicking the order sample, order sample, order sample. And I think you guys looking after that whole logistical process. I've heard so many stories over the years, guys, where someone is using one supplier and then they finally look at a second supplier and go, they can do a better quality product slightly cheaper as well. So imagine if you did that via 10, 20, 30 different suppliers and using your what my friend James likes to call product economics, and actually look at, okay, each product, what are the economics behind how much we can pay for it, delivery cost to get it here, what we can then sell it at, to know what's our shelf for product if it was that good, and then could we actually increase the price of the product if it was even better, rather than doing, which is a really dangerous way of doing e-commerce, which is race to the bottom and trying to get things as cheap as possible. I mentioned at the start, Anthony, as well about that. I think it's an average saving, isn't it, of about 40% you guys find, because you do so much homework to go, you're overpaying for a product that could be better, and let's give you a suite of options and you can choose.
That's exactly right. So, I mean, your brands will be familiar with this. You have your product you want to make, you find a couple suppliers, a handful of suppliers that reach out to them. Some are not answering, some of the communication's a bit shaky. You finally land on one who seems like they can get they have a good handle of what you're trying to make. They give you a quote. You might have another quote from another supplier that seems pretty good. And you'll just choose the one that is maybe more cost effective. Imagine the savings that you get when you're not just comparing a handful of quotes, but you're comparing, several hundreds. And so what we'll do is that we'll be engaging with hundreds of suppliers at once, and then come back to you with a series of quotes that best match what you're looking for. And what that allows us to do is just by sheer volume, we can get much more competitive quotes than you could doing this yourself, in addition to saving you the hundreds of hours of
Mm.
communication, staying up till God knows what time in order to get the quotes and get those communications done.
Amazing, amazing. And if people want to reach out and get in touch with you guys, obviously I mentioned at the start, everyone, you've got to mention winning with Shopify. You'll get 50% off sample run, and you've got to have an invite anyway. If you just fill out the form on the website, I think they get chucked in a list of people, and you basically join the waiting list to get involved. Whereas winning with Shopify, people front of the queue, you get spoken to, and cavela.com. Is that right, Anthony?
That's right. cavela.com. I think we're going to put an affiliate link there as well. There's a
Yeah.
code as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Amazing. So yeah, if you click on that link, guys, that'll again automatically put you to the front of the queue. As you can imagine, right now Anthony is incredibly busy. He's currently sitting in Mexico. As much as I know you used to be in the UK a bit as well, also US based,
Yep.
West Coast, and your colleagues are on the East Coast. Like these guys are at the forefront of product sourcing, and so I definitely recommend reaching out. Anthony, any final comments or thoughts from your side at all?
No, I'd just say that look, it's a tough time for a lot of brands out there, and I think that to the extent that you can weather the storm, I think that things are going to be looking a little bit more manageable. But it's what I tell a lot of brands. Like everyone's in the same boat right now. A lot of brands are hurting, and everyone is not really sure what to do. So try to find resources that help you get through this. But you're not alone, and there are products and services and solutions available that can make things hopefully a little bit more manageable while we get some clarity on what's going on globally.
And you never know, working with Cavella might actually save you guys money anyway, regardless of all the tariffs and everything else, by getting that supplier diversification. So, Anthony, I mean, thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing so many great insights. And you guys are going to be involved quite a bit going forward, as are our other sponsors as well. So, you'll probably hear from Anthony or some of the team again in the future. Might even get some of the brands on that are working with you guys, talk about how they've optimized that process as well. So, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you with us.
Nick, thanks so much, and looking forward to the next conversation.
Amazing. And for everybody listening at home, we'll be back again next Friday. Apologies if we missed the odd week or two. As I say, I'm trying to balance doing my job and also being a dad. So we're learning as we go. But thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, hit subscribe, leave us a review, and we look forward to having you joining us on the show again next week. Thanks for tuning in. Do you ever find that in your warehouse you have dead stock? You can't sell it, no one wants to buy it, and you can't get a refund on it. Or alternatively, you're missing inventory in your warehouse that you need. You've got sales coming in and you're low on stock and you haven't ordered more stock in time. All these things hit profit, and I've been there. I've run my own Shopify store and had exactly that problem. But we've partnered it up with Inventory Planner, who have the most incredible app to help you manage that and forecast exactly what products, what SKUs, even down to what color of product you need to order in advance to make sure stock levels remain consistent throughout. They're also running a 7-day boot camp. And if you want to go and sign up to that, it's 7 emails over 7 days. And it takes the same amount of time as your morning coffee. And in 7 days, like me, you can become an inventory management pro. Both links are in the description. Enjoy.